Hello again, Venerables. How are you? Now, we've finished lecture 1, so let us move on to lecture 2, which is the pre-Buddhist background of ancient India. We will be covering this lesson relatively short compared to lecture 1 in 6 parts. Part 1, we'll talk about ancient India in terms of geography and philosophy and religion. Then ancient India in terms of civilizations, Indus Valley and Aryan, moving specifically to Indus Valley civilization, focusing on religion, and then Aryan civilization focusing on religion, which is Brahmanism. And then part 5, continuing with Indian religion from 1500 BCE, before Christian era, to the 6th century. And then we'll conclude with a few words on homework. All right. Now, this topic, pre-Buddhist background of ancient India, will be taught as a course by Bhante Chandawimala. So our lecture here is just to give you a brief introduction, a brief overview of this pre-Buddhist background. All the details will be given throughout the 16-week course of Bhante Chandawimala. All right? So not to worry. It's just a brief introduction and overview to ancient India. On this note, let us go on to part 1, which is ancient India in terms of geography and philosophy and religion. Now, as I've said before, the aim of this lecture is to understand the life and teaching of the Buddha in a broader historical and cultural context. Now, I'm looking at lecture 2 notes. So if you have lecture 2 notes in front of you, you can go through with me as we go through the PowerPoint slides. If not, it is all right. Just follow the lecture through the PowerPoint slides, and then after that, you can revise your lecture 2 notes. Okay? So I repeat, the aim of this lecture is to understand the life and teaching of the Buddha in a broader historical and cultural context. Now here, it is useful to make an analogy between Indian geography on one hand, and on the other hand, with the origin and development of Indian philosophy and religion, looking at the example of 2 great rivers, the Ganges and the Yamuna. All right, the Ganges River, the Yamuna rivers. Here we want to take a look at these 2 rivers, their path, and then how they can be used as an analogy, as an example of the origin and development of Indian philosophy and religion. So take a look at the map on the right? The Ganges and the Yamuna rivers, they have separate sources in the high Himalayas. Eventually, they unite in the plains of northern India and flow on together until they empty into the Bay of Bengal. So take a look at the map on the right? You see Yamuna River in the center on the left, and then on the right paralleling it, it is the Ganges River. Take a look at where they start from, right? Different sources in the Himalayan mountains. So for about half the length, they flow in 2 separate, almost parallel ways. And then somewhere in the center, right, they meet together, they unite, and then they flow together as one, as the Ganges, all the way down into the Bay of Bengal. So this is the geography of the flow of these two rivers. Now on the left is a close-up of these two rivers. Again, you see Yamuna River, we have Delhi there, and then just on the right, paralleling it, that's the Ganges River. And again, look at how they had two different sources and origin from the Himalayan mountain. Then they move, travel together, and then somewhere around the point of Allahabad, right? Allahabad, they meet together, then they flow as one, the Ganges. They flow by the holy city of Varanasi, they flow into Patna, and then they flow into Bangladesh, right? Today's Bangladesh, into the Bay of Bengal. Okay, so this is the flow of two rivers separately in their origins and around half their way, and then they meet together and flow together into the Bay of Bengal. So Indian culture, Indian philosophy, and Indian religion, it is similar to this geography of the two rivers. There are two great currents of thought that were originally quite different and distinct in character, but eventually they drew closer together, they merged, and then they continue to flow on together right up to the present day. Okay, so Indian culture, philosophy, religion, originally there are also two major patterns, just like the two major rivers. They originated separately, and then they flow separately, and then somewhere in time together, these two different cultures and philosophies, religions, they meet together, just like the two rivers meeting at Allahabad, and then after that, they flow together until the present day. So this is the analogy used between the two great rivers of Yamuna and Ganges and the origins and development of Indian philosophy and religion. Okay, now this lecture, the pre-Buddhist background, is basically taken from your textbook, The Tree of Enlightenment, chapter 2. Okay, the pre-Buddhist background. So I'm just picking up some important points and then explaining to you, so that later on when you go through the chapter 2 of the Tree Enlightenment yourself, you will find it easier to understand the content of the chapter. All right, so this is the first part on ancient India in terms of geography and philosophy and religion. Now let's go on to part 2, which is ancient India, looking at the civilizations of Indus Valley and Aryan civilization. All right, so we talk about two different civilizations, just like the two rivers, different in origins and development. Okay, so let us start off with the Indus Valley civilization. Now, from roughly the period 2800 to 1800 BCE, before Christian era, we have the emergence of the Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization in northwest India. Okay, this was actually a very highly developed civilization, like the civilizations of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia or Babylon. Yeah, these are well-known civilizations of the ancient old world. And this period of Indian history, right, represented by the Indus Valley civilization, also represents the Bronze Age of Indian history. Right? Bronze Age is an age when people mainly use bronze for their tools and equipment of the ancient world. Now the dates, don't worry so much about dates, right? 2008, I give you 2800 to 1800 here, but if you read some other sources or you check different websites, they may give you different dates. That's because it's happened so long ago. So scholars have not reached a consensus on exactly which are the dates. So it is all right, right? Don't worry about the dates too much. There will be some variations, some differences given in different sources. So again, take a look at this Indus Valley civilization. We have the two major cities of Harappa in the north and then Mohenjo-Daro. These are the two major cities of Indus Valley civilization, okay, in northwestern India. So in the center here, we have the Indus Valley civilization, but at the same time, there are also other ancient civilizations of the old world, right? Which is roughly around the period 3000 to 1500 BC or BCE. So we talk about on the west, the ancient civilizations of Egypt, as you can see, and then the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia, yeah, with the major city of Babylon. And then on the east of India, of course, we have the ancient civilization of China. All right, so the yellow areas mark the civilized areas, and then the red dots, the important cities, and then we have early migrations of people, Indo-Europeans, represented by the brown arrows and the pink arrows, as you can see. Some of them going on to India. And then we have sea trade represented by the ships, right? So there's also maritime trade between the Indus civilization and the Mesopotamian and Egyptian ancient civilizations. Okay? Then below the map, you see some of sculptures and artwork produced during the Indus Valley civilizations, right? Looks at bronze sculptures. Okay, we talk about it as the Bronze Age. Now, this Indus Valley civilization, it has an immense geographical extent from western Pakistan to Bombay, which is now known as Mumbai, and then to Shimla, or the foothills of the Himalayas. Okay, so we see Western Pakistan, right? We see present Pakistan. So the Indus civilization encompassed the western part of Pakistan. And then we see Mumbai, which is today called Mumbai in the south. And then in the east, right, just above New Delhi, this represent Shimla, the foothills of Himalayas. And then the two major cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. This is the big, vast geographical extent of the Indus Valley civilization. So this civilization was stable for 1,000 years. It was very advanced, both materially and spiritually. Okay, what are some of the major features? Let us take a look. Well, it was agrarian. Agrarian means agricultural. Okay, and then it has a good system of irrigation. Yeah, irrigation is a kind of drainage system, right? You you carve out sort of canals, and then water flow from the rivers. You direct the water to flow into these canals, and then these canals will serve the needs of the people, right? Perhaps for agriculture, perhaps for your own daily water needs. So it is a good system of irrigation. And then as you can see from the picture, it has good urban planning, right? The different houses of the different people, the different homes, they are all planned out very systematically. So good urban planning. And it had mathematics, which is based on a binary model. Binary means two. Okay, so like computer, we have 0 and 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So their mathematics of this Indus Valley civilization was also based on a binary model. And the people were literate. That means they can read and write. However, the script that remains to us today remain largely undeciphered. So on the right hand, you can see some of the script and some of the artworks produced by the Indus civilization, right? The artifacts. Until today, scholars are still debating on how to understand the script, how to decipher, how to understand and decipher the scripts. All right. So these are some of the major features of the Indus Valley civilization. Now, roughly from around the period 1800 to 1500 BC, there was probably a natural disaster, perhaps an earthquake, perhaps droughts or other kinds of natural disasters. And then it was also during this period that we have the migrations of people from the northwest. These people who migrated from the northwest are known as the Aryans. Yeah, and they are a people who originally belonged to a region somewhere in Central Asia, in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Turkey, Southern Russia, Northern Iran region. And they were very different from the original people of the Indus Valley civilization, which we've talked about earlier on. So you see the map here. We have the Aryans, right? The root of the Aryans, roughly around 1500, coming from on the east, the Black Sea, the Caucasus Mountains, then go down to the east, south, Caspian Sea, to the plateau of Iran, and then moving into northwestern India, and then into central India and southern parts of India. So the migration of this group of people known as the Aryans. We've talked about the features of the Indus Valley civilization. Now, what about the features of this Aryan civilization? Well, we're on page 2 of your lecture notes now. First of all, the Aryan people, they were nomadic and pastoral, right? So the earlier people in this valley, we said that they are agrarian, they are agricultural, which means they are sedentary, right? They stay in one place and they plant their crops. So the Aryan people were nomadic. Nomadic, that means they travel from place to place to place. They were not fixed in one place, right? And then they were pastoral. So their land, they were used for the keeping and grazing of sheep, of cattle. So they were nomadic and pastoral. And they were not used to agricultural, agrarian, sedentary, and urban life, right? So those were the features of the earlier Indus Valley civilization, but the new Aryan people, they were not used to agrarian, sedentary, and urban life. And then they are a warlike and expansionist people. So as they went, they fought, and then they occupied territories. And it seems that after 1500 BCE, Indian society was largely dominated by the Aryan people, by their culture, and by their values. All right? And from the period from 1500 to 600 BCE, this is known as the Vedic period of Indian history. The Vedic period also represents the Iron Age of Indian history. So the people now, the tools and equipment they used were mainly iron in comparison to the earlier Bronze Age. So here we see pictures of the Vedic period of the Aryan people. Yeah, on the top left-hand corner we have the Vedas, the holy text. Then down on the left bottom we have the Sanskrit literature, Mahabharata and then we see the Aryan people in terms of their religious figures, right, on the top right hand corner. And then on the top right bottom corner we have the Aryan kings and ministries of the Vedic period, the government officials of the Vedic period. Now, from around 400 BCE to 400 CE, Christian era, we have the emergence of two very famous Sanskrit Hindu epics known as the Ramayana and Mahabharata. And until today, yeah, they remain very popular stories talking about ancient India. And if you are from the Theravada countries of Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar, you will also be very familiar with the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata, right? So the Ramayana is a story about the life of Prince Rama and his wife Sita and his brother Lakshmana, right? So because of political intrigue, their father, who was a king, exiled Prince Rama to the forest for 14 years. So Prince Rama brought his wife and his brother to the forest, traveling around the forests of India. And then later on, yeah, in his life, he then rose to power and he became king again. So many adventures of Ramayana, the sacred epic of gods and demons. Now, the Mahabharata is another very famous story of the struggle for power between two groups of princes and their successors, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Okay, so in the struggle for powers, subsequently the Pandava princes won, and then they ruled for 36 years in a kingdom in India. So two very famous Sanskrit Hindu epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, emerging during this period of the Vedic age and continuing to be very popular until present times. So we have taken a look at the ancient Indian civilizations of Indus Valley and Aryans. Now let us move on to specifically focus on their religions. Okay. Now, what are the sources that we use to understand about the religion of the Indus Valley civilization and the Aryan civilization? Well, there are two major sources. The first major source is to look at the archaeological discoveries at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa for the Indus Valley civilization, right? So you see on the picture below, the ruins, the archaeological ruins and discoveries at the two major cities of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. So archaeology scholars will look at them, examine them, and then tell us stories about how the life and religion of Indus Valley civilization were like. Another major source is to look at the oldest Sanskrit text of the Aryans, known as the Vedas. So here we can see the Vedas, and Vedas means knowledge. Okay, Vedas means knowledge, and there are four Vedas. The four Vedas are known as Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. You can see the four Vedas on the top right picture here. All right? Now, what are the Vedas? The Vedas are a body of revealed oral teachings and hymns. Yeah, they're very ancient, the oldest Sanskrit text of the Aryans, holy texts. So revealed oral teachings. Yeah, oral teachings, because at that time, long time ago, there were no written records yet. So oral teachings, and then after that, followed by written teachings. So revealed teachings mean they were revealed presumably by the gods and then passed down through the ancient sages of India. So these Vedas, right, also, when we look at them, when we investigate, when scholars investigate, examine them, they can also tell us a lot about the religious life of these two civilizations. Now, each Veda itself, right, has four parts. And these four parts are known as the Samhitas, which consist mainly of hymns. Then follow the Brahmanas, which are primarily rituals. Then the Aranyakas, which are theologies or theologies of rituals, and then the Upanishads, which are philosophies, right? Expositions on the philosophical aspects of Brahmanism. So for instance, if we take a look at the Samhitas, under each of the 4 Vedas, we'll have the Samhitas. So we have the Rig Veda Samhitas. The Rig Veda Samhitas represent the oldest, right? Composed around 1500 to 1200 BCE, hymns and mantras, the Samhitas. Then there's also Samhitas of the other 3 Vedas, the Sama Samhitas, the Yajo Samhitas, the Atharva Samhita. So these are the earliest parts of the Veda. And then later on in time, there were compositions known as the Brahmanas. These emerge around 1000 to 800 BCE, and they are ritual commentaries, commentaries on rituals. So each of the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samada Veda, Atharva Veda also have Brahmanas. Then they also had Aranyakas, which are theologies of rituals or understandings and practices of rituals. Then followed by the Upanishads, which are expositions on the philosophical aspects of Brahmanism. So for instance, we have the Buddhadhamma and Chandogya, which were composed around the 7th to 6th centuries BCE, followed by the Taittiriya, Aitreya, and Kaushitaki, done in the 6th to 5th centuries BCE. All right, let us take a of them. So the Samhitas, the basic Vedic texts are the Samhita collections of the 4 Vedas. The Rig Veda, also known as the knowledge of the hymns of praise. The Sama Veda, knowledge of the melodies. Yajur Veda, knowledge of the sacrificial formulas. Atharva Vedas, knowledge of the magic formulas. So basically like mantras, yeah? So we have one example from the Rig Veda called the first sloka of Rig Veda from Agni Sukta, the fire god, right? Agni is the fire god. Oh, Agni, the foremost, radiant are you, the primordial conductor. Oblations to you, the deliverer of prosperity. So this is a hymn. And then on the right, we have the Vedas, the Samhitas of the Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Vedas. This is the index dictionary of the Sanskrit terms. So this is briefly about the Samhita. Then the Brahmanas, they are commentaries, explanation of proper methods and meaning of Vedic Samhita rituals in the 4 Vedas. They also incorporate myths, legends, and in some cases philosophy. And each regional Vedic Shaka or each school, Vedic school, has its own operating manual like Brahmana texts, most of which have been lost. There were a total of 18 Brahmana texts, and they survive into modern times, 2 associated with the Rig Veda, 6 with the Yajur Veda, 10 with the Sama Veda, and 1 with the Atharva Veda. Right? So Brahmanas are basically commentaries on rituals, ritual manuals. Then we have the Aranyakas. They are called the forest books. They describe how Vedic rituals can be performed in symbolic ways by forest-dwelling ascetics. This alerts us to the fact that by the time of the Aranyakas, there were some Hindus seeking spiritual perfection through ascetic practices like living outdoor, practicing silence, and restricting their diets. On the right is a book called Symbolism in the Aranyakas and their impact on the Upanishads, a remarkable cultural upheaval which ever inspires the future thought. So Aranyakas are about theologies of rituals, right? Religious understandings and practices. What about the Upanishads? The meaning of Upanishad means sitting near, implying sitting near a teacher to get knowledge. Upanishad also means knowledge. So it represents an earnest quest for truth, to understand truth, to seek truth, and they represent the end part of the Vedas, so known as the Vedanta. And each Veda has 4 sections, as we've said before: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. And within the Vedas, there are 2 major sections, one on ritualistic part and another on knowledge. So the ritualistic part is for personal and material gains, known as the lower knowledge, and the Upanishadic knowledge is known as the higher knowledge of self and transcendent states of awareness. And some Upanishads attack the ritualistic practices of the Vedas explicitly and implicitly. So basically, the Upanishads are the latest portions of the Vedas, and they represent the philosophies of the Vedas. So from these two major sources, right, there are 5 aspects that we can learn about the religion of Indus Valley civilization. Now, before I go on to that, if you don't understand so much of this Vedas, not to worry. As I said, right, you will have one whole course taught by Bhante Chandawimala on Indian religion before the times of the Buddha. So the 5 aspects of religion during Indus Valley civilization. First is meditation, or the practice of training the mind. So during this period, right, early times of the Indus Valley civilization, there were already people engaging in meditation, practicing, developing their mind. The second aspect is the practice of renunciation. That means they live the life of a homeless ascetic or mendicant, sannyasin, and they're known as samanas, right? Samanas, or Sanskrit sramana, means one who strives religiously, spiritually. Okay, so this practice of renunciation, homelessness, they live the life of a ascetic. Ascetics are people who practice very strict self-discipline. They lead simple way of life. They are celibate, no sex. They are often solitary. They are recluse. They are hermits, and they are mendicants. Mendicants are people begging for food, right? Begging for alms. Okay, so that's the second aspect. The third aspect is that the people of this time, they had some religious conception of rebirth or reincarnation occurring over the course of a countless number of lives. So somehow the people of that time believed that that's not their only present life, but there are many lives. The fourth aspect is a sense of moral responsibility extending beyond this life, some form of the conception of a karma. Okay, so these people believe that there's not only the present life, but past lives and future lives, and morality is very important, right? In the kind of lives that determine the present, the past, the future. So, like the subsequent Buddhist understanding of karma. And then the fifth aspect is that the people of this time, right? They seem to have an ultimate goal of religious life, and that is liberation or freedom from the endless cycle of birth and death. Okay, so to summarize, in this part 3 Indus Valley civilization, we look at religion, and then we can talk about these religious aspects from 2 sources, archaeology and then the Vedas, right? So the 5 aspects are meditation, renunciation, some conception of rebirth, reincarnation, sense of moral responsibility, and some form of karma, and then the 5th aspect, the ultimate goal of religious life, liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Now, let us move on then to take a look at the religion of the Aryan civilization, yeah, also known as Brahmanism of Aryan civilization. Now, we've seen that the Aryan civilization represented people of a later age migrating from outside of India into India, and then they have their own cultures and values, right? So their own religion too, which is known as Brahmanism. And this stands in contrast to the religion of the earlier Indus Valley civilization. And then from the Vedas, right, we know that there are 6 aspects of their religion. So the first aspect of their religion is that there were many gods for them, right? They revered many gods or devas, and their gods were often personifications of natural phenomena. So for example, we have Indra, which is the god of thunder and lightning. We have Agni, the god of fire, and Varuna, the god of water. Okay, so for the Aryan people, there are many gods. So this is known as polytheism, right? If a religion has many gods, this is known as polytheism. So look at this slide. We have beginning with Agni, the god of fire. Then we have Brahma, the god of creation. With Shiva, the god of the earth. We have Indra, the god of sky and thunder, or lightning and thunder. We have the Varuna, the god of water. And then we have Vayu, the god of wind. So these are some of the many gods, or the major gods of the Aryan civilization, of Brahmanism, of their religion known as Brahmanism. So in this aspect, the fact that their religion is polytheistic with many gods, it is similar to the religion of the ancient Greeks. So around this period, right, the 4th century BC, to the west of India, we have the Greek Empire, right? The mighty, large Greek Empire, which you can see stretching from Greece on the west, Macedonia, all the way to the borders of India, right? Arachnosia, okay, Bactria, Gedrosia. So this is the Greek Empire. And then the Greek Empire is also polytheism. They have many gods, and here are some of the major gods, right? You have gods of Zeus, Hera, Ares, Aphrodite, Dionysus, Demeter, Hephaestus, etc., etc., etc. So in a way, the polytheistic religion of the Aryans, Brahmanism, is similar to the religion of the ancient Greeks, many gods. So that's the first aspect of the Indus, of the Aryan civilization, their religion. The second aspect is that the priest, known as the Brahmana or Brahmin, was the most important religious figure. And this is in contrast to the ascetic, right? In this Valley religion, we say ascetic is the most important, the Samana, the most important. But for Brahmanism, the priest or the Brahmana, the Brahmin, is the most important religious figure. As you can see in the pictures here, they are practicing their rituals. Yeah? And then the third feature is that the most worthy life was that of the family man or the householder. And this stands in contrast to the value system of renunciation. In the Indus Valley civilization, we say that their religious value system respects renunciation, right? But for Brahmanism, their major figure was that of the family man, the householder. And then the fourth aspect of Brahmanism is their emphasis on progeny, particularly sons, which are given the highest priority. And this is in contrast to the non-emphasis on progeny, on celibacy. In this Valley civilization, we talk about the samanas, right? The religious seekers, they will celibate, no sex, and of course no sex means no children, right? But here, Brahmana, the emphasis is on progeny. Progeny means descendants, offsprings, children, and of course they preferred sons to daughters. So this is the fourth aspect. And then the fifth aspect is the practice of ritual sacrifice. All right, the practice of sacrifice, the practice of rituals. So for example, they would use grain, milk, or animals as the primary means of communicating with their gods. They do rituals to hopefully to secure victory in war. They do rituals to try to obtain sons and wealth, and then they do rituals to try to reach the heaven. So this is in contrast to the practice of meditation and the ultimate goal of liberation of the Indus Valley civilization. Yeah, so here we see on the top picture, the Brahmins, the priests, doing fire rituals. And then on the right, you see the emphasis on householders, right? On the family man, on the emphasis on children, on progeny, and on overall, right, on rituals to as a daily practices in all their life. So the sixth aspect of Brahmanism is that there's no conceptions of rebirth and karma. There's no notion of moral responsibility extending beyond the present life. The highest social value was loyalty to the group, so as to contribute to the power and cohesion of the tribe. So the earlier Indus Valley civilization, the people there believe in countless numbers of lives, rebirth, karma. But for Brahmanism, not so, right? The emphasis was more on the present life and on loyalty, right? That they expect people to be loyal to their own group so that their own group will become powerful and cohesive. So to summarize, while the religion of the Indus Valley civilization stressed renunciation, meditation, rebirth, karma, and the final goal of liberation, the Aryan religion stressed this life, ritual sacrifice, loyalty, wealth, progeny, power, and heaven. And there are two more differences in these religious cultures. The first is the division of Aryan society into a divinely ordained hierarchy of four social classes, or known as varnas, determined by birth. So at the top, we have the Brahmins, the priests, followed by the Kshatriyas or Kshatriyas, the warrior leaders, followed by the Vaishyas or Vesa, the cattle rearers and cultivators, merchants and artisans, then the Sudras or Sudas, servants. And then in later Hinduism, this system incorporated thousands of lesser social groupings and became known as the Jati or caste system. And the members of the top three Varnas were seen to be Aryas, right? Or Arya, the noble ones, socially superior due to the claimed purity of their descent. And then below this tree, we have the Sudras, the commoners, and then the untouchables, right? And right on top of them, we have the gods. So this, in the Aryan society, this is their division of social classes. And these are determined by their birth. That means into which family you're born into, you fall into which of these hierarchies. Yeah, the Aryans were the pure noble ones represented by the top three social groupings. And then the Sudras and the untouchables were the non-Aryans. Okay. And of course, in Hinduism today, we still have the caste system broken down into even many social groupings known as the Jati. So this is different from Indus Valley civilization. And another major difference is the Aryan belief in the authority and infallibility of revelation, the Vedas, in Upanishadic philosophy, belief in Atman, which is soul, or Pali known as Attan, and Brahman, which is the cosmic principle. Okay, so in Aryans, they believe that the Vedas revealed the words of the gods as presented through their ancient sages. So the Vedas are a large body of religious texts originating in ancient India. Composed in Vedic Sanskrit, the texts constitute the oldest layer of Sanskrit literature and the oldest scriptures of Hinduism. Hindus consider the Vedas to be Apauruseya, which means not of a man, superhuman and impersonal, authorless. So basically the teachings of their gods, of the many gods given to them by their ancient sages. So revelations. And then the Upanishads will tell us about their understanding of Atman, soul, and Brahman, the cosmic principle. So real state there is no form, only real state exists. So at the lowest level of understanding, because of ignorance, we think that the Atman, the soul, and the Brahman, the universal cosmic principle, are different. Then as knowledge dawns, we see the soul and the Brahman coming together. And then a higher stage of knowledge, the soul is part of the Brahman. And then at the higher stage of knowledge, that everything is Brahman, the cosmic principle, right? So this is the Upanishad philosophy of Atman and Brahman, soul and cosmic principle. let's move on to part 5, which is Indian religion from 1500 BCE to the 6th century. So here we have the history during this period, with the history of the interaction between these two originally opposed traditions. They began to interact, influence, and even merge with each other, like the merging of the Ganges and the Yamuna rivers. So we have talked about the differences of Indus Valley civilization, their religious practices, and that of the Aryan civilization and their religious practices. So it's like they originated from two different parts, and then for a long period of time they practiced differently, just like the two different Ganges and Yamuna rivers. And then at a particular point in time, they came together and then they flowed as one until present days. So for instance, by the time of the Buddha, we already have a very heterogeneous religious culture. It means a very complex, complicated religious culture flourishing in India. So there were all kinds of religious cultures, religious beliefs during this period, from the 1500 BCE to the 6th century, during the time of the Buddha. So for instance, there were Brahmins who practiced asceticism in forests. Yeah, so earlier on we talked about Brahmins mainly being householders, but during the time of the Buddha, there were Brahmins who were ascetics, just like the earlier Indus Valley civilization, Samanas, right? Practicing strict disciplines in the forest. Then there were religious groups like the Jains, yeah, the religion of Jainism. So on the left we see a Jain, yeah, a lot of Jains emphasize non-violence. So they wear, just like masks now, right? Pandemic, we wear masks. They wear masks so that they will not unintentionally kill insects, right? In case some insects fly into their mouths. And then there's another group known as the Ajivikas. Yeah, this group believes in no free will. Everything is preordained. Everything is fated. Okay, so they believe that the people, ordinary people, they cannot decide on what they to do, right? Because everything about them is fated. Their life is all fated. It's all preordained, and this is all a function of the cosmic, a function of universe. So they have no free will. So this is a book on the history and the doctrines of the Ajivikas, a vanished Indian religion. We have another group known as the materialists, or annihilationism. So this group of people believe that people, right, it's all about the body, right? And when we die, that's all. There's nothing else. Right? It's just the body, matter, and we live because of matter. We die. As a matter, as a form of matter. That's about it, right? Nothing else. And then there's another religious group known as the skeptics, or ill-wriggling, which means that if you ask them for their specific positions, they would neither agree nor disagree, right? They would sort of wriggle. They would say, well. So that's why they are called skeptics, wriggling around with no specific positions. So why then were these two initially different religions able to merge, just like the two rivers, right? Yamuna and Ganges eventually merging. There are a few reasons. So we talk about how the end of the Aryan expansion led to many social, economic, and political changes that affected the life of the Indian people. So the Aryan people came as invaders, they conquered, they expanded their empire, and then after a while, they settled down, right? And then as they settled down, there were many social, economic, and political changes. So first of all, the tribal, nomadic, and pastoral way of life of the early Aryans gradually changed into a more sedentary, agrarian, and eventually urban pattern of existence. So from people who just traveled from one place to another, they became sedentary, they became agricultural, and they lived in houses just like the earlier urban in the civilization, right? And then as they settled down, as the lives became more sedentary, as they exist in larger groups, commerce or trade became increasingly important based on a money economy. So we've talked about their classification, their hierarchy, right, of the social classes. Brahmins at the top, priests, then the Kshatriyas, the rulers and the warriors, then followed by the Vaishyas, right, farmers, craftspeople, traders. And in this context, trading, right, commerce became more and more important based on economy. Economy as a medium of transaction. And below it, we have the workers and servants, and then even below them, we have the untouchables. Then the third reason, right, the third major change is that the tribal pattern of social organization was replaced by the territorial state, in which many people of different tribes existed together. For example, the kingdoms of Magadha and Kosala. Okay, so here we talk about, as people settle together more and more, there must be larger and larger groups of people coming together, and then they became states, they became kingdoms. So here we have the examples of kingdoms such as Kosala and Magadha, right, which you can find in the map here. And during the period from 600 to 300 BCE, this was the period of the 16 Mahajanapadas, or 16 kingdoms, yeah, in northern India, as you can see from this map here. So 600 to 300 BCE, the Mahajanapadas and their capitals shown in this map. Then roughly from the 322 to 185 BCE period, a Maurya dynasty coming into the picture. The Maurya dynasty was a very big dynasty, as you can see from here, right? Their tributaries, the capital city, other cities, the edicts of Asoka and Buddhist sites, of course, very well known because of King Asoka, the Buddhist king. Now, this Maurya Empire, Chandragupta Maurya, who reigned from 322 to 297 BCE, and then his grandson was Asoka. And of course, we know him as the Buddhist emperor of India. And his reign lasted from around 268 to 232 BCE. So this period of Indian history, Buddhism in India, Mr. Chuan Seng will be teaching you in another course. Okay, so right now we only want to have a brief overview, a brief introduction. Now, after the Maurya Empire, we have a period of Indian history from 200 BCE to 320 CE, Christian era, known as the early classical period. And during this period, there are many kingdoms, and the two most famous empires are the Sunga Empire and the Satavahana Empire, which you can see in the map here. Okay, so this is the early classical period of Indian history from 200 BCE to 320 CE. And then after this period, we have the classical period of Indian history from 320 to 650. And this is represented by the Gupta Empire. And the Gupta Empire is known as the golden age of Hinduism. Okay, so on the map here, you see the Gupta Empire at its peak, right? We have Magadha, the capital city of Pataliputra, and then we have their tributaries and vassals. So focus in the northern central of India with vassal states, right? With tributaries on the west, on the east, and in the south. So this is the Gupta Empire representing the golden age of Hinduism. So overall, let us summarize the development, origins and development of Buddhism, and the origins and development of Brahmanism into Hinduism. So Buddhism is a religion that draws most of its inspiration from the religious culture of the Indus Valley civilization. the elements of renunciation, meditation, rebirth, karma, and liberation are the major aspects, right? A smaller proportion may be traced to the religion of the early Aryans, such as the presence of the gods of the Vedas, but their role is peripheral. So Buddhism, inspiration largely from the religious culture of Indus Valley. And then there's some influence from the Aryan Brahmanism, but not important, right? Of course, for instance, we talk about the gods also in Buddhism. What about Hinduism? Developed from Brahmanism around 200 BCE. So in contrast, conversely, many schools of Hinduism retain a greater proportion of elements of religious culture inherited from the Aryan tradition. For instance, the caste, the authority of revelation in the shape of the Vedas, and the efficacy of the practice of sacrifice. A much smaller proportion can be traced back to the religion of the Indus Valley, such as renunciation, meditation, rebirth, karma, and liberation. Okay, so Hinduism developed from Brahmanism, and they are derived largely from the religious culture of the Aryan tradition. So as you can see here, many gods, right? And then a smaller part of Hinduism could also be traced back to the Indus Valley. Yeah, we talk about ascetics practicing, even Hindu ascetics practicing renunciation, meditation. We also talk about the beliefs in rebirth, karma, and liberation. Okay, so this ends our lecture on pre-Buddhist background of ancient India. Now, for your homework, you just read on your own, okay? You read the Tree of Enlightenment, the basic text, chapter 2, which will give you more details on the pre-Buddhist background. And please watch the video. It's a 12-minute video about history summarized. Ancient India traces very quickly from the Indus civilization to King Ashoka of the Mauryan Empire. This is a YouTube video. You click onto it. The narrator talks in a very fast manner, but don't worry, right? You just take a look and listen. Take a look at all the pictures, all the visuals, and then you just listen as much as you can, and you will have a very good overall understanding of Indian history, ancient Indian history, from the Indus civilization to King Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire. So a quick summary of what we covered for lecture 2. We started off with ancient India, looking at geography and philosophy and religion. Geography, we talk about the two rivers of Ganges and Yamuna. Then we move on to take a look at the civilizations of the Indus Valley and Aryans. Subsequently, we look at their religions, right? The religion of Indus Valley civilization and the religion, Brahmanism, of Aryan civilization. Subsequently, in part 5, we talk about Indian religion from 1500 BCE to the 6th century. So here we talk about how the religious practices of the earlier two civilizations, they were originated differently. They had different paths, but then they came together around this period, just like the two different rivers, Ganges and Yamuna, from different origins, then halfway through coming together and flow into as one river, the Ganges, into the Bay of Bengal. And then we summarize with some comments on Buddhism, largely tracing back to the religious culture of Indus Valley civilization. And then we talk about Hinduism, which emerged from around 200 BCE, largely derived from the Brahmanism and the religious culture of the Aryan civilization. So that's it for lecture 2. I hope you enjoy it and learn much of it. And we will talk again, 1 week later during the 3rd week of this course. So thank you very much. Goodbye. Have a wonderful week.